Welcome to Living Out Loud with your host, Jess Phillips, where we talk all things addictions, codependency, relationships, and the good, bad, and ugly in between. Hi, everybody. My name is Jess Phillips. I'm super grateful you're here. I'm a master's level clinician and a relationship and attachment trauma coach. I help freedom-seeking women regain their confidence, master their triggers, and communicate their needs so they can finally put an end to toxic relationships, low self-worth, feeling like an imposter, and become more authentic, trusting, and secure. I know exactly what it feels like to be spinning in circles, stuck in obsession, and living life with all or nothing thinking. After years of failed relationships, impulsive decisions, yo-yo dieting, and riding emotional roller coasters, I knew I needed to get to the root of my issues and that I couldn't go on like this any longer. And that's exactly why I created the 10-week Secure Self-Coaching Program. I was tired of wasting time and money on professionals that didn't understand me. And I knew that trying to fix my own problems with the same thinking that got me there wasn't going to help me get any closer to my goals. If this sounds like you, feel free to send me a message and we'll set up a free consultation call to see if my program is right for you. You can find the link to my website in the show notes. Now back to the show. Enjoy. Welcome everyone to another episode of Living Out Loud with your host, Jess Phillips. Super excited to be here. And I just poured a coffee at 2:47 p.m., which is going to be a terrible mistake when I try to go to sleep tonight, but I don't care. It's been a very productive Monday, and we're just going to roll with it, Still very much an addict. When I feel good and things are exciting and productive, I want it to stay that way, and I do that by ruining it by having caffeine at 3 p.m. But anyways, let's jump into it. Got another awesome topic slash question for today's episode. So one of my listeners wrote in, why are boundaries so important and what to do in the face of someone who doesn't respect them? I love this question. And I love boundaries, probably because I never had any in the past. And when you go from not having any boundaries to having them, you start to feel better. Who would have thought? I didn't even really know that you could have boundaries, Really all depends on kind of what you're taught at a young age and what's modeled to you. And some people really grow up in homes where boundaries are pretty clear, Maybe they grew up in a super strict home or just a home that was pretty healthy and the lines in the sand were pretty clear. But for many of us folks, and probably the majority of the folks listening to this podcast, did not grow up that way. So let's dive into it. First, let's just kind of start off with what is a boundary, because there's lots of different versions of boundaries and definitions of boundaries. And the best definition that I've heard so far is imagining like an invisible fence around you. So we all walk around and we all have our fences, and your fence protects you from me coming into your yard. And my fence does the same thing. It protects me from you coming into my yard. And I like that because it's visual. I'm a very visual person. It kind of gives me the impression of, some people have like nice fences, nice white picket fences, and they look inviting, but I still know not to cross it. And then you see those like iron fences maybe with the barbed wire on top, and I'm like, whoa, definitely not going over there. And then you see probably these very low fences or these kind of like electric dog fences, however those work. And I'm just plowing right through those. So that was the best definition that I've heard of boundaries so far, was really just this kind of protective mechanism around all of us, and really kind of our responsibility to tell others or to show others what that line in the sand looks like. So let's talk a little bit more about that. So the best way that I can simplify the topic of boundaries is really putting them into different categories. So the easiest one to start with is a physical boundary. So all of my friends are going to laugh at this one. I'm not a big hugger. I'm not super touchy-feely. I didn't grow up that way. Well, mind you, my mother is. My mother's very affectionate. My father is very British, and a pat on the head and $50 usually does the trick. So uh I'm not the warmest, fuzziest, especially with strangers. Like in a relationship or people who are close to me. Well, that's a stretch. Even people that are close to me don't get the warm and fuzzies. But anyways, regardless, I don't love hugs, and I definitely don't love the double Quebecois kiss on the cheek. So, in order for me to set that boundary, well, first I'll tell you what it looked like when I didn't set that boundary. So, as many of you know, I'm in recovery. I go to a lot of recovery meetings. I'm surrounded by a lot of people at all times. And when you're in a large group of people, it's kind of hard to scream off a rooftop what your boundaries look like. So, I remember, and especially when I was younger, I got sober at 21. So, I've been in recovery for quite a long time. And there were huggers. There were huggers in these meetings, and they were quite tight huggers. And there would be people, usually older gentlemen, and they would come in for the hug. And the hug just felt just a little too tight and just lasted a little too long for even probably somebody who enjoyed hugs. And I wasn't one of them. And I remember this was the exact narrative in my head. Don't say anything, Jess. They're old. They kind of get this like old man pass, and just leave it alone. Don't cause a scene. Don't say anything. And that makes me really sad now at 38 to think back at 21-year-old me. Not that I was probably respecting other people's boundaries either, but we'll get into that later. But for the time being, it was really just this idea of like, don't stand up for yourself, because if you say something now, you're going to either embarrass yourself, you're going to embarrass the other person, you're going to cause a scene, you're not going to be polite. And that's really the problem behind the boundary. Rarely is it the boundary that's the problem to set. Most people could say, hey, please don't hug me, or you're making me uncomfortable, whatever it is. But that's not the hard part. The hard part is all of the story that we have underneath because of years of programming or certain messaging that has told us don't speak up, or don't cause a commotion, or for a lot of females, right? Like just kind of bite your tongue and don't say anything. And so today, what that would look like now with a strong set of boundaries is when someone is walking towards me, it's very clear on my end what's about to happen next for the two of us. So, say, for example, it's a friend walking towards me and they want a hug. I will look like I want a hug if I feel that way in that moment, right? My arms will be open. I'll be like, hey, how's it going? And it looks like I want to embrace you. What I had to start doing when I didn't want a hug, or when it was with a stranger, and thank God for COVID, because the ultimate amazing fist bump came back in, and then I really didn't have to hug anybody. But what I do now is I put out my hand, and it very, very, very much looks like I want a handshake. Like the elbow is almost locked. That's how badly I don't want a hug. And I would say 97% of the time it works. I've had a few people be like, come on, are you serious? Or what's that? And those are the moments, right? Those are the cringy moments where I'm like, oh, just hug the person. But I really try very hard not to today. If I'm setting a boundary, I really try to stick by it. And I just kind of keep that elbow locked, because the boundaries for me, how the other person takes the boundary or interprets it, is really, that's their side of the street. That's going to be their issue. Because if I were to think of everybody's response to my boundaries and start worrying about that, God, I'd probably never set any boundaries, because it would make me so overwhelmed. I had to get to the point where it was like, okay, do I want to be hugging these people? Do I want to kiss? I don't want any of it. So I put out my hands. And so that would really go into our number one little boundary bucket of physical boundaries. So you can take some time too, as you're listening, to think of any boundaries that perhaps you want to start setting, or maybe you have started to set in the physical department. I know my mom used to tell me when I was a kid, I had like white, curly, curly, curly blonde hair. And it was awesome. It was just huge, especially in the summer. It would like really puff up. And she said strangers would come up and they would go right for my hair. Right. And my mom's savage. I should have had her on for this boundary episode. My mom can set a boundary because she doesn't give a shit what the other person thinks. It's great. And she'd be like, I could like even imagine her like smacking the person's hand away, like, do not touch my daughter's hair. She was good with those boundaries. So take some time, think about for yourself, because what I said earlier too about I don't know how well I was respecting other people's boundaries. And this doesn't have to be in like an extreme way, or crossing a boundary doesn't have to mean something completely inappropriate. It could have been, I don't know, it could be like, hey, I love your shirt, and like kind of like running my hand up the side of the shirt, or just touching without thinking, touching somebody's hair, whatever it is that's kind of off limits for them and important for them. It really made me stop and think, like physical space is a big one for people, myself included. The famous close talker. I've literally like backed up from people before, and they just like continue. They just love to be very close to your face when they're talking. So, take some time to just think of, are there any boundaries for yourself that are being crossed maybe by someone that you can work on strengthening a little bit, or vice versa. Then we start to get into the more kind of difficult, nuanced boundaries, which are kind of emotional and mental boundaries. And these can be as heavy or light as we make them. But let's start off with a lighter example. So, say, for example, somebody says, it's 9 o'clock at night. It's close to my bedtime. I wake up very early and I go to bed very early, and I don't have very much left in the tank at night, especially not for like a heavier conversation. So most people know, and I set the boundary like, hey, if you want to chat or if you want to talk about something, call me between this time and this time. That's a boundary. That's more of like a mental boundary for me. I know now, because the tricky thing about boundaries is that when we don't respect our own boundaries, it often starts to border into resentment, which isn't fair to ourselves or to the other person, because we haven't clearly stated, and sometimes we don't know, so it's not our fault, but we haven't clearly stated what it is that we need. So let's take the phone call, for example. If I haven't told somebody that I am not my best self at 9 p.m. and I won't be able to help you through A, B, or C, whatever you're calling about, and the person calls and I answer and I get all like, ugh, whether it's to them or after I get off the call, kind of this like, self-righteous, how dare you contact me, whatever's going through the person's head at that time, that is a result of me not letting the person know. And this might be second nature to a lot of you, but I really like, I was such a people pleaser, and I felt like I had to be on and perform and be perfect all the time, that like even when, say, my mom was calling, I didn't know I could not answer the phone. Like, I didn't know I could just leave it to voicemail and then get back to her later. Say, for example, I would leave work and I'm leaving the clinic and it's like 7 o'clock at night and I'm walking home. and I'm like getting some fresh air and I'm just trying to quiet the noise in my head, say it's been a long, busy day, and the phone rings, home calling. Boom, it was like an automatic. I would just pick it up. And as a result of that, we would normally end up in some type of uncomfortable conversation, an argument. I would be snippy, all because I didn't take a moment to set my own boundary. And even if I felt like I had to answer, because if you have a mother like mine, she'll call back 3 times and she'll think that I'm dead in a ditch, even though I've been sober for over 17 years. I don't know what she still thinks, but she's like, honey, where have you been? I'm like, honey, I'm almost 40. When are you going to stop calling me 5 times a day? But I can pick up the phone and I can say, Mom, I just finished work. I don't have anything left in the tank right now, but I will call you back in 2 hours. Boom, boundary set. So just to recap, the boundary can be A, please call from this time to this time after, like, I know a lot of people after 7 p.m., they're done. They're turning their phone off. They're not taking any phone calls. Great. If that works for you, go ahead. So that can be door A. And door B can be picking up the phone and just letting the person know how you feel, or shooting them a text message. Hey, just saw that you called, had a super long day. Is it okay if I call you tomorrow morning at ABC time? And then if it's an emergency, right? If the person is like, because I know how it feels to be spinning out and really needing somebody in that moment. And I tell people the same. If you are totally spinning out and this is an SOS emergency and I don't answer, just text me SOS, right? And then if I really can't be there for you, hopefully we can figure something else out and somebody else can be there. But it's really important. Like a lot of these boundaries, they really narrow down to this idea of self-abandonment, people pleasing, a level of codependency, really just either maybe like not being able to say no. You know, with my clients, we really, 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 really drive home the idea of the pause. Just pausing for a second when, using the example I just used, somebody's calling, just pause, check in for a sec, let it go to voicemail. Like, I don't know how many emergencies you listeners get on a daily basis. I don't get that many. So let it go to voicemail. What's the worst thing that can happen? And just take a second. Have I eaten yet today? Have I gotten fresh air yet today? Have I moved my body in some way today? Am I mentally okay to take this call right now? Because I want to make sure that my cup is full too. Because if I take a call with an empty tank, just really never goes that well, you know? So those are some of the lighter ones. Now we start to move into some of the deeper ones that really, I mean, we'll go through different tiers of them, but there's a lot of psychological damage that can be done by not respecting somebody's boundary. And you guys know I primarily work with people on relationship issues, attachment issues, specifically anxious attachment. And that can get a little bit confusing because when you're highly anxious, it's pretty difficult to respect your partner's boundaries in the moment if you're spinning out, because you feel like you're going to die, you feel like you're going to be abandoned, and you feel like this is never going to be resolved. So say, for example, you're dating a more avoidant person or even a secure person that needs a little bit of space from your meltdown, or say the 2 hour argument or conversation that you just had and they're tapping out, right? It is a lot easier for an anxious person to disrespect a boundary because of how stuck in self they are in that moment. And they don't do it in a malicious way. They're not like, oh, I really want to cross your boundaries and make you feel uncomfortable. They're just thinking of themselves and they really need help on regulating in that moment. But maybe I'll do a whole separate podcast episode on anxious attachment and boundaries. But for now, let's just talk about some of the more complicated emotional boundaries and mental boundaries that can get crossed, because then we can also really tap into levels of gaslighting, levels of narcissism. And more often than not, friends, clients, the discussions that we have around boundaries and people who don't respect our boundaries, at the end of the day, more often than not, your friends, your coworkers, people that you are not super emotionally connected to, you're going to have a better chance at them respecting your boundaries than your family, your parents, your primary caregivers, your siblings, and your romantic partners. Let's just put the healthy relationships aside right now, because I think they're doing okay and they're also probably not listening to this podcast. But let's take the relationships, and especially the relationships that we have with dysfunctional family members. That's when you're really going to start to get to the meat and potatoes of boundary crossing. So the second part of this question was, what do we do when we set a boundary and it's not respected? So I like to give the kind of 3-strike rule with people. And again, this normally rarely happens with friends, or probably never with coworkers. But let's say family members or partners, right? So say, for example, I set a boundary with one of my parents, and we're at a barbecue or a family function, and I don't know, I'm trying to make up something a little bit lighter. Say I don't want my food commented on. Okay. So I'm at the barbecue and I have now set a boundary with a family member. And I said, hey, so and so, it seems like every time we're at a family function, you seem to comment about what's on my plate. I would really appreciate it if you didn't do that anymore and we didn't really talk about food or weight as a subject, especially in public. And the person's like, okay, I hear you. Right. So boom, now next we're at this barbecue and they're like, hey, Jess, you're going back for seconds? That's strike one. Okay. So we've had the conversation. I've set the boundary, but I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. Something slipped, whatever it was. Ha ha ha. I'm not going to call you out at the party, but if you feel like you need to, you can go right ahead, because that's a boundary of yours. That's strike number one. Number two, say it happens again in some other setting, and then I remind the person, if this happens a third time, who has the problem here? Right? That's really the way that I look at it. So one of the biggest things that I've done in my life was I really had to recognize the ability of the people around me, family members included. And I had a terrible history of expecting certain behavior from people, partners included, who maybe I didn't realize at the time, but now I realize, who actually couldn't do what I was asking. And I don't know why, and that can be its own episode. But for whatever reason, they're stuck in their ways, or they think certain things are funny that I don't, or they think that my boundaries are A, B, and C, whatever it is, whatever their reason. My role in all of that is to recognize who and what I'm dealing with. So let's take a friend, for example. Chances are, if I sat a friend down and I said, hey, whatever you said at the barbecue last night about my plate, it really embarrassed me, and it brought up a lot of like old weight fears and shame and blah, blah, blah. Probably 9.5 out of 10 times, I can guarantee you the person would be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Either I didn't even realize I said it, or they would just feel bad, as would I if somebody brought something like that up to me. When you're dealing with difficult family members, or maybe your partner, who are not respecting what you're asking, or maybe laughing about what you're asking, or here's a couple of one-liners that you might get, which are wildly just even more disturbing, but they can say something like, "You're so sensitive," or "Come on, lighten up. It was just a joke. You used to be able to laugh at all of this stuff. When did you become so A, B, and C, blah, 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 blah," right? Those are really all of the triggering responses. And that's when we start to border a little bit more into gaslighting behavior. So the real kind of trick here is, and I don't think there's a one size fits all solution, but there's been one person in my life who has, maybe two, let's say two. There's been two people in my life who were probably the most difficult people to set boundaries with. And for me, and it might look different for you, and you can take some time to journal about this, like what you think is the best path going forward. But with these two people, I had to come to the unfortunate conclusion that they probably were never going to respect my boundaries. And before I came to that conclusion, I went through years of kind of obsessing about how to get them to understand, or even worse, how to show them how insane they were. I was just talking to somebody about that the other day. I went on like a mission for a while to, I think it was like in my early 20s. I had a lot of narcissistic people around me who I probably like sought out subconsciously myself. But then I made it my mission to tell them how narcissistic they were and how insane they were and point out all of their behavior. But I kept them around, I kept them in my life. So I would just do that. And then I would just tell them how nuts they were. So not fun for anybody, right? But in this case, I knew that I was going to die trying, basically. With these two people, it was like this fork in the road decision. It was like, okay, continue to have this conversation, Jess, and continue to remind them of the boundary, continue to remind them of how much it hurt your feelings. Or I really had to remove, and not fully, but I lessened significantly the amount of time that I was spending with these people. And that's really the unfortunate kind of worst case scenario. But there are people out there who are not going to respect your boundaries. And when I did that, A, not only did my own healing journey like really kind of rocket, I was able to to better clearly see what healthy dynamics should look like. So it really helped me see the people that I decided to keep in my life, how we interacted with each other was very different than how I interacted with those two people. If ever I needed to bring something up, if ever I was hurt by something, we would have a conversation about it, and vice versa. I became this person. I remember once, actually, it wasn't even that long ago. Somebody called me out of the blue after a little get together, and I didn't even realize, I'm not going to repeat it, but I didn't even realize what I had said and the context that it could have been taken in. And she called me out of the blue and she said, "Hey, so and so, I just want to let you know I was really offended by A, B, and C." And I was so taken aback. But at the same time, I I was so impressed by her ability to, she didn't know how I was going to react, and she stood up for herself, And she stood up for what she believed in, and she confronted me on it. And we had this beautiful conversation. I can't even believe I let that slip out of my mouth, but hey, we're all human and things happen. And it really helped me to level up my level of awareness and what I'm saying, because I tend to get very like nervous, anxious in big crowds of people. And I still get this like clown that comes out or this comedian, and I don't even know, but it really made me hyper aware of what I was saying and who can interpret certain things a certain way. And it was this really nice, respectful conversation. So, if you have people in your life, it's really going to be up to you to assess the history you've had with them and just look for evidence. That's probably my best suggestion is, have you tried to set boundaries with this person before? How did they respond to these boundaries? Do you have a 10-year history of them not respecting your boundaries, of them gaslighting you? Whatever the case may be, take some time to journal about it. You're kind of like the toughest eggs that you have in your life. And you get to decide whether you want to continue either a friendship or, I mean, it's hard with blood family. But you can also just take space, and also a boundary looks like, hey, I'm taking space from you, and that's okay. Or, I've said this to people in the past, hey, I only want to communicate via email for a little while. Let's just let all the old kind of patterns and dust settle a little bit. And there's so many different ways that you can go about that it because a lot of the work again isn't about convincing the other person or getting the other person to become more respectful or better able to handle our boundaries, because a lot of the times that's never going to happen. So where does the work lie? The work lies in my response, in my ability to take the time and reflect on the type of relationship that I want to have with this person, and also the healing that I need to do, because there is a very, 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 very uncomfortable process that people go through, especially when they do this work. I watch almost every single one of my clients go through this when they do the deep dive, is that you're literally shedding an old version of yourself. So if somebody is used to old Jess for 25, 30 years, and then all of a sudden I have these new set of boundaries and I'm operating in a different way, it's going to get uncomfortable for a bit. I'm going to get a lot of comments, and I did. I remember back in the day, especially when I was getting sober. Oh my God, I heard it all. I've heard you've changed. You're boring. You used to be so fun and spontaneous. And I'm like, yeah, I used to also be fucking flat broke in a motel at 8 o'clock in the morning. What's your point? I'd much rather be in bed at 9 o'clock p.m. rather than just getting started, which is what I used to be doing. So again, really just taking that time to decide who you want to be, right? If you're changing, it's important to think about those changes. Otherwise, people are just going to continue to be shocked. And not that you have to announce off a rooftop that you're changing and you're, wanting to live your life in a different way. But I think a healthy boundary to set is, letting people know, I'm not really into X, Y, and Z anymore. Or I know I used to come over for dinner every Thursday night, but I'm not going to be doing that anymore. I'm going to my running club or yoga or whatever it is. So, take some time to think about the really tough relationships that you have in your life. And just to cover a couple of examples of just extreme gaslighting and abusive behavior. I'm not really touching on that today, but I'll just say this. I think that is it's one of the worst forms of abuse that I've seen is that level of psychological abuse. And even more so, and I was just talking about this yesterday, I think there's some people out there with very strong narcissistic traits that they know when they're gaslighting someone, and they know when they're trying to make somebody's head spin, and they know that they're trying to control and manipulate a situation. But then there's other people, and I really don't think that they know. Like, I really don't think they know in the moment. I think they're so lost and stuck in their lies or just in this fantasy, because the ones I'm thinking of, they're not malicious people, but they're still, it's like this, they can't be wrong. They cannot admit that they just can't, and they hide behind this wall of ego, and they will defend their point until death. And it's just crazy making, it's really intense to do that to someone, to really psychologically make them feel that what they're experiencing or what they saw or the behavior that they're calling you out on did not happen. That's bigger than boundaries. And I really wouldn't encourage anybody to remain in a situation like that. And it's as clear as this: if you feel like you're being gaslit, you're being gaslit. You don't need any more clarification than that. If your head is fucking spinning when you're talking to somebody, your head is spinning. That's all you need to know. That's it. And that's a very powerful, dangerous game on the other person's part. And all I can say about putting up boundaries with that is there's certain people who behave that way that are no longer in my life today. And if they would try to do that to me, I mean, I wouldn't even engage. I'd probably just stand there and, I don't know, just nod or just stare them dead in the eye. Like, I used to get so triggered by that stuff before, and I'd be like, oh, you're a liar and blah, 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 and get into this whole, no, 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 not into that at all anymore. My boundary is being very hyper aware of any type of gaslighting behavior. And if that's happening for my own peace of mind and my own mental health, I really just walk away from that. So if you are in that situation, just please recognize how abusive that situation is, and take some time to think about, what boundary that you may need to set in your life, because constructing a plan to be able to have a comeback or an argument with these type of people, it's actually quite useless. But to stick with and kind of close up the boundaries that we've been talking about is really, thinking about like thinking about the life that you want to lead, right? Because I never knew I had so much power of choice. I never knew that, like, if I said I'm not available here or I don't want to do this, it's okay. Like, it's okay, and it doesn't make me a bad person. Actually, a friend of mine today texted me, and she's like, and it was kind of like a joke. She knows that I don't like hiking. I don't like anything about hiking. And she's like, hey, me and so are going hiking this month. Do you want to come? And I was like, hey, A, good to hear from you. I was just thinking of you. B, thanks for thinking of me. I always tell somebody that. And C, not a fucking chance. Absolutely not. I hate bugs. I hate spiders. I hate ticks. I hate dirt. I'm terrified of bears. I watch too many horror bear movies. And as much as I want to spend time with you, so what I did say is, please let me know the next activity that you're planning, or let's, do dinner or something inside. And that was that. And it didn't have to be this big deal. Whereas before, my God, if I had to say no to someone or tell someone, I would just lie. I'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. I like whatever you like, and let's go do it. And I could never stand up for myself. Or when I did, it was like ultra aggressive. It was either completely passive or super aggressive. There was never this like assertive middle ground where I could just be like, hey, thanks so much for the invite. Really dislike hiking. I'm in for the next indoor activity. And that was that, you know? So to summarize, why are boundaries so important? Because they give us a sense of self. They build our self-identity. They build confidence. And like we're adults now, unless there's any teens listening to this podcast, which I doubt, but we're adults now. So, you know, and this is a lot of the work that I do in my coaching program is a big piece on reparenting. You know, who's showing up for us now, right? Who's telling me, Jess, I don't think that you should eat a bag of M&Ms for dinner. I have to invite the parent into the room sometimes. And that's what happens when I set boundaries. You know, as much as fun as I'm having, guys, it's, you know, midnight and I'm going to CrossFit tomorrow morning. I gotta go. Boom. Reparent boundaries. And they're like, no, Jess, come on, stay. I mean, I can choose to do whatever I want, but there's times where I really have to do the right thing for myself. And that's the scary thing about being an adult. You know, I was in such a rush to grow up, and now I'm a grown up and I'm like, my God, there's a lot of responsibilities. And like nobody's coming to do it for me. Nobody's coming to save me. Nobody's coming to make money for me. Nobody's coming to do these podcast episodes for me. No, I have to suit up and I have to show up. Right. And if I've gone through periods of not setting boundaries and a lot of self-abandonment, the catch-22 is that I start feeling like shit about myself. And when I start feeling like shit about myself, I don't do any of the good things that make me feel good. But when I feel confident and when I feel empowered and when I've been showing up as the parent for myself, then I can start making better decisions and I'm in a better mood. I'm in a better headspace. So it really goes all full circle. So that's why boundaries are so important. And really, if you have people in your life that are not respecting your boundaries, take some time, take out a journal, write down who they are. And again, just look for a little bit of that evidence. You know, do you have 10 years of evidence showing that they're not respecting your boundaries? Well, that's going to lead maybe to a different solution for you, right? But if it's somebody, maybe it's a tough family member, but maybe after journaling, you begin to realize, oh, wow, I've never told them how this really makes me feel, or I've never told them that I don't like to talk at night, or whatever it is. And then you can have this like aha moment, and you're like, oh, wow, okay, maybe I'll set up a coffee with them or a phone call and I'll let them know. And that can change your whole relationship too. You know, there's been a lot of amazing conversations that I've had with people that have changed the trajectory of our relationship because they didn't know that's what I needed or that's how I felt before. So I hope this was helpful. I could talk about boundaries till I'm blue in the face, but I don't want to do insanely long episodes going forward. So again, thank you all for listening. Keep sending your questions. I love them so much, and I will talk to you soon. Bye. Thanks everyone for listening and supporting Living Out Loud. Be sure to tune in next week for another fun, juicy episode.